Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, another session in our legal technology webinar series. I'm Hella Schwartz-Grossman, and I have a few housekeeping items before we get started. We are recording this session, and everyone is muted, but if you have any questions, just put them into the questions pane, and we'll address them later on. We also have a few handouts available today, so if you'd like to download those, you can do that in the control panel. During today's roundtable discussion, we'll cover another very popular topic, security. Did you know that Worldox is a great tool for risk reduction for your firm? We're joined by several of our inner circle VARs to help you provide answers and suggestions to today's topic, and you'll learn about group security, ethical walls, individual and owner file security, and settings and features, and much more. And I'm pleased to introduce our panelists today. We have Frank Jones and Sandy Johnson from Legal Software Connection, Bill Baker, Charlotte Quiroz and Van Swearingen at Baker and Cadence Solutions, John Rock and Peter Brannigan from DoxAdvisors, Rick Bernauer of Cytek, John Heckman of Heckman Consulting, and our moderator today is Rebecca Satin. And we thank you in advance for the attention you'll be giving our presentation today. And Rebecca, go ahead.
Thanks, Hella. So Worldox does have a multitude of security features that are built into our core products, and we don't charge extra for any of those features. We've gathered together this great group of our inner circle resellers today with collectively, we were just talking about it, and I always say over 100 years of experience, but I think it might be over 200 years of experience in implementing Worldox. Anyway, they're going to be sharing some of their different methods to secure your documents in Worldox. And this week, we're starting with Rick Bernauer of Cytek Corporation. You want to get this started, Rick?
Thanks, Rebecca. I appreciate it. For everyone, when we were talking about this and preparing, one of the first things we wanted to say is, security has become more and more important for law firms. You are a target out there. You have very high value data that people are after, and you need to be able to protect it out there. So security should be part of your firm's culture, just not something you think about during a 45-minute web session out here. It needs to be incorporated, that you think about how we have people using our computers, where are we storing our data, what about encryption, how do we secure things, do multi-factor authentication. All these types of things is what we're going to be talking about today. But a big part is to make sure that at your firm, that the management of the firm is thinking about it and structuring the way you orient your employees, bring them in to really say security is important to us. Worldox can tie in with your other efforts at your firm about security through all sorts of different ways of securing your documents. And we're going to go through and talk about those, but I tried to break them up into some different areas. And those would be things that a user can do, user-defined security, apply it out there. Things that the Worldox administrator, the manager of your system, could help set up and enforce. And then things that take value-added resellers, VARs like us or your IT people to get to, and that are more network-based. And so we're going to try to divide up and talk about some of those, because there are some things you can just do as a user, others that you have to be the administrator to do, and others you probably need to have your IT support involved with them. And on all of these, setting up security, you could end up locking people out of things they want to be in, or setting it up so it's more cumbersome. So we highly recommend that you contact one of us or someone like us who has experience with it, because it's not always just knowing that a feature's there, but it's knowing the pitfalls of that feature or the way it really works out there. So I would highly advise, before you jump into some of the more advanced ideas in particular that will get discussed here, that you think about contacting a VAR to be able to help out with it. So ready for that next slide, Rebecca? So this is just a rough breakout, and we're going to be going through these different things, but the idea is that Some of the things that we'll be talking about can be user setup, like using encryption on the machine, setting security out there, checking things out. The middle section, and you'll be able to get to this, information, I think in the downloads, there are things that takes the administrator of the system to set up, limiting access to certain cabinets, setting up a synchronization with your Active Directory. And then other parts really are IT based, but that's getting all three of them together is what makes Worldox secure. And one of the benefits is Worldox has the capability of working in all of these areas to be able to help you set up the level of security that makes sense to you. So one of those that we wanted to talk about, just kind of as the next slide, is that Bitlocker encryption. I think other people may reference that, but if you're not familiar with it, the idea is that Bitlocker is built into Windows and can encrypt the data that you have on your server or on your workstations, your tablets, notebooks, so that if that notebook was lost or stolen, somebody couldn't just grab the hard drive and be able to read data off of it out there. It's fairly easy to set up, but there are certain things you have to get into and make selections on, and you have to save the key for what's out there. So again, this is kind of a IT level that you might want to talk to, but the users can do it themselves, and you can do it to your home computers to help give an extra level of security so that if something, if your home was burglarized and somebody took your computer, they couldn't get to the data that's out there. But those are the kind of things to look through, and I'm not going to get into the super detail, but look up about Bitlocker, and it could be very good, particularly if you have those security audits that are asking, is your data encrypted at rest and things like that. The Bitlocker can take care of that. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over and let us go through each one of the different VARs and have them kind of give their insights to some of these different features. Thanks.
So thanks, Rick. One of the things that I always think of as soon as I think of security in Worldox is our ethical wall system. And Frank is going to tell us a little bit about how to set that up with a pessimistic security model and why you might want to do that.
Well, thank you. So, Rick, great introduction. This topic would fit into, first of all, it would be an admin-controlled function, and it would also combine the IT side because we'd want to have some server security also. And it ties into his thought about some of those RFPs that you guys are receiving, and you have to meet certain criteria, and that can be very demanding, and the Bitlocker server data encryption would be very important in that. But what I'm going to share today is just something that's food for thought. This would be really a one-off in the sense that I'm going to talk about a different model. And I was first made aware of this maybe 6 or 7 years ago by a customer who came to me and said, in our law firm, it's becoming super important that the people here can only see the matters that they are responsible for. So if you're an attorney, you're assigned certain matters, probably in the billing system. If you're a legal assistant, paralegal, everyone, they only are going to be able to access what they are supposed to. And if you think about that, that goes against what most of us got into this business doing, where we were thinking about knowledge sharing and collaboration within the firm, that all this information would become searchable by all, reusable by all. New attorneys come on and find great boilerplate. I think that's what we all grew up with. And then as we move into the new world, it seems that we've got client-driven data protection and information governance. Rebecca is an absolute expert in that area, by the way. And all of a sudden, that may lead to a need to know model, a need to know, that you're only able to gain access to what you need to know. And that's a complete one-off, a total opposite. So fortunately, as Rebecca said, we have all these security tools and they're free, they're part of your software. but one of the most useful ones is ethical walls in conjunction with security groups. So others today are going to share some other information on this, but looking at the first screenshot that we have up here, this is the end result of something. So the end result of this is that different people within the firm have been granted access to certain ethical walls, and those ethical walls are being controlled by security groups. And depending which security group you're a member of, when you go to save something, when you go to access something, you only see what you need to know. You can only search and retrieve what you need to know. So in this example, Mary J. Miller goes to save, and she has access to the client files cabinet, and she's only seeing 3 clients. Whereas to the right there, Robert T. Smith sees 2 clients, of which, let's see, one of those is in common with Mary, so they must be working on the same client. And then there may be one more screenshot there, Rebecca. Whereas this user, somebody named Frank, has access to all the clients. And that is simply achieved by the proper allocation of security groups with users and then ethical walls to block and tackle. I thought I'd probably end there, but then I decided, well, maybe we need to go a little bit further. So if there are more screenshots, and there may be a handout in your, okay, that defines this a bit more. And I promise you folks something. If you want to go down this road, you really do need to talk to your Worldox VAR. And we need to do testing, and got to be careful because this can be tricky. Can't it, Sandy?
Oh, yes.
So in this example, what we're calling the pessimistic security model. And if you go Google this, by the way, ILTA has some reference to this because 5 or 6 years ago, this became a discussion point at ILTA. And there are firms doing this. And there are belief systems out there that more and more firms are going to need to do this in order to protect the clients that are dictating that they're able to do this or something similar to this. So in this model, there's some best practices here. You'll notice on the far left, there's reference to a client with an asterisk and then a client and a matter, both with asterisks. I'm not going to get into teaching what this means other than it's best practice. There's a reason for this. But the purpose of this is, if you look in the center screen, you'll notice that the client with the asterisk, meaning all clients are blocked to the profile group called client files. I made that screenshot with GX3. Sorry, Rebecca, it says profile group instead of cabinets. Okay. So if everybody in the firm is blocked to everything, all clients, the bottom of that screen shows that the same is true with matters, that you're blocked from all clients and all matters. But I've allowed the 6.0 user, you Worldox managers know there's this master manager user, and we want that to have access to everything so the indexer can have access to everything. If there's another screen, we'll go a little forward. And again, there's no quiz here. Is there another screen, Rebecca?
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's actually a couple of other screens.
Okay. It was a while ago when I made those. So on the left here, it's showing the use of security groups that others today are also going to talk about. And, you know, I named these in ways that made sense to me. There's more than one way you can do this, of course. One says client allow all. Guess what? If you have a user that's supposed to have access to everything, they'd go there. Whereas the others, Fred Flintstone, George Jane, these are just different clients that have different memberships, i.e. users that have been assigned those groups magically get only those clients. If they're assigned to 50 of them, they are in 50 different groups. We have a customer that has thousands, I mean thousands of ethical walls and hundreds of security groups. They are a firm doing work for major companies, and all of those companies, every single one of them, only is hiring this firm because they are able to achieve this. Okay. In that example, I think the far right showing 1, 2, 3, 4 matter asterisk. It's allowed to the George Adams group. One more screenshot, I think. And finally, it's showing down there in the bottom that there's a user, Mary J. Miller, that has been assigned into that particular group. And on the right, you'll notice the ethical role is granting the 1, 2, 3, 4 matter asterisk, which means all matters of that particular client. Now, I would love to hear from other panelists here, and I have one little sneaky tip that I've actually toyed with some customers that are tied into this model. And if it's a bonus, okay? In Worldox, in GX4, you have a feature called snippets. When you do a text search, below each file, if you have this enabled, there are snippets, that's our term, little pieces of information about the words you searched for and where they exist in that document. You could actually take this model and employ security where tied to this is the following, that certain documents are secured and the security is that all they can do is find them. They can't read them, they can't edit them, they can't copy move. All they can do is find them. Guess what, folks? In that example, you could have a knowledge product search out there, searching for content that would lead the user to know this content was found in this particular client matter, but all they can see is the little snippet. But then they would know what the client matter is. They could ask the administrator who's responsible for that, because I need to talk to them about getting some access to some of this work product that I may want to use for myself. Very secret tip, but could be very useful. And that
is a good
my
tip.
session.
I've actually talked to firms who want to set up, they're very, they have Worldox, and they've talked to us about knowledge management systems and how to use Worldox to do knowledge management. And what firms that are large enough to do this have done is, first of all, if you're a lawyer and you're looking for a document because you worked on something like 6 months ago, 6 years ago, that had some text that you want to reuse, the first time that you look that up, maybe, okay, you don't care. But if you look it up more than once, then you need to identify that document as something that should be flagged to be part of the knowledge management system. And some firms, if they have enough staff to do this, will have a person who's designated that will take that file and they will de-identify it so that it doesn't have any information that pertains to that client. And then they can put it in a separate cabinet that's organized by, type of law or however they want to organize it. And that document can now be part of that knowledge management system that everybody can search, because it no longer has anything that's, pertains to that specific client. So there's no issue with that information being searchable to everybody. But that requires a firm that's large enough to have personnel available to do that thing. So anyway, moving right along, I think
Rebecca,
Bill
just
is
to
going to
follow
tell
up on
us.
that, one quick follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
In doing some research for this, I was curious whether the pessimistic model was a term I just got in my head, or had I heard that somewhere? It actually is a term. And in doing some research,
Yeah.
I found out exactly what you said, by the way. And the recommendation is that firms really do need to have these knowledge people that are responsible for that other cabinet. And they realize it's a major project, but the compromise between sharing and protecting is almost in the future going to require that those people exist. It may be even an attorney, that is one of their primary roles within a law firm.
Yes. And a lot of the large firms do have, a chief knowledge management officer or things like that. Anyway, another feature that is also one of my favorite security features is our Audit Trail, which I believe Bill had some interesting things to say about that.
Yes, thanks, Rebecca. This is a feature that is very powerful and useful, but a lot of people don't know about it. In fact, just this week, I had a client call and ask if there was a way for us in Worldox to show them if if users were using Worldox, were saving documents to Worldox rather than outside of Worldox. And this feature, the Audit Trail, is one that I said we could do. So it's very simple to use, and it tells you who accessed the document, when they accessed it, and what they did with the document. And it's right on the main menu, as you can see here. You'll see the word audit and then the word search. And when you click search, that's when you'll be able to fill out a form that will then do the search for you and tell you what has been done to a document or a group of documents or what one user might have done. So it's very simple to use. Here's an example of what the report looks like. And you can see that it shows you the date, the time, what they did to it, what the doc number was. All the information about the document is right there in that Audit Trail report. So it's very useful. Some other ways that this has been used, we've had firms call and say attorney's leaving, and we'd like to know if he or she copied any documents before notifying us that they were leaving. So with the Audit Trail, we were able to look back and see what was done by that one user in copying documents. And another is people want to know who touched the document and what they did to it, and whether other users doing other things with the same document. All that is going to be available in the Audit Trail report. So again, very popular, very easy to use feature, but not as well known. Then the next is a feature called Notify. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So Notify allows you to set up an inquiry as to tell you when somebody has touched a document that you want to be notified about. So you might have a very secure document that you don't want other people to see, or certain other groups of people, users to see. You can put Notify, and this is a sample of the screen that you fill out. You pick the you can give the notification a name, so you can have many of them if you need to within the firm, and then you can pick the cabinet that you want to monitor, and then you can pick what users you want to monitor, and then what those users might be doing to the documents. You could go down to a specific document level as well. And then what happens is when they do one of those things, then you get an email notifying you immediately that that's just happened. And so you can be notified as soon as it happens and take some action. And on that right panel there, you'll see all the different features or functions that Worldox monitors. There's actually even more than what I could show in that slide. So Notify is a feature that has been available in Worldox GX4. It's at no charge, and the same for the audit feature, and ones that I think that firms should know about. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Bill. Actually, one thing to note about this is that depending on how Worldox is set up in somebody's environment, they may or may not have rights to see some of these things. They might be able to search the audit trail for a particular file, but they might not have the ability to get to Notify or some of the other features. So that's controlled in WD Admin, which I think somebody else is going to be talking about a little bit later. So next up, we have a feature that is maybe you don't think of immediately when you think of security, but it still involves some security. It's our check-in and check-out feature. Let's see. And Charlotte is going to be telling us a little bit more about this.
That's right. So checking in and checking out a document. When you are going to be away from the office, so I work from a laptop. When I'm away from the office, it gives me the ability, and do you have some slides for me, Rebecca?
Yeah, you should be seeing one now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Duh. So check in and check
That's
out.
okay.
Checkout gives you the ability to check out a document and electronically take it with you. So for instance, even though I work from a laptop and I have Worldox on my laptop, if I'm going to be away from the office, if checkout gives me the ability to make a copy of the document and save it locally. When I'm, say, in an airplane at 30,000 feet, I can fire up my laptop. I can start Worldox. It will not connect to the Worldox server because I'm away from the office. But what it will do is it will start up offline, and it gives me the ability then to work with those documents that I've checked out. So to check out the document, what you would do is you would click the little box to the left of the document. Now, if you're working with one document, you don't have to click it. You don't have to have a checkbox in the box in order to check it out if you're just working with one. But if you're working with multiples, you will locate the documents and tick the little box to the left so that there's check mark box in there. Then on any one of those documents, it doesn't matter which one, you will right mouse click and choose checkout. Now, something to keep in mind here. When you right mouse click and you're choosing one of those features, there's actually two levels there. So there's the first screen, and then at the bottom there is show more. And then when you show more, there's a second screen. Checkout lives on the second screen, but once you use it, it'll move to the first screen. If you don't use it for 3 days, it'll move back to the second screen. Move, copy, check out, check in, delete, all work from that second screen. When you check the document out, right, you will get a message from Worldox that says, are you working with these 3 documents? And you'll say, yes, go ahead and continue. And then it gives you an option of where you want to check it out. Do you want to check it out to the local mirror or to another targeted folder? So if you're running your Worldox from a laptop and when you're connected to the server, when you're in the office, right, there is a folder on your laptop called local mirror. If you're going to work with these documents from some other computer, maybe you're going to visit and you're taking a home laptop that does not have Worldox installed, then you'll check it out to another targeted folder, like a flash drive. Now, when you check it out, then what the rest of the team sees on that document is a little message at the bottom that says the document's been checked out and tells you who it was checked out by. Now, those of you using Worldox Enterprise or Worldox Cloud, you're already used to seeing that, because when you open a document, it actually checks it out. And then it makes it read-only to everyone back in the office. Okay, so you'll see a little message at the bottom of the document that says that it's checked out and when it was checked out. When you open that document, the checked out document, you'll open that document and work on it, whether it's checked out to the mirror or checked out to a flash drive, etc. Now, I have worked on the document while it was offline, and I am now back in the office. I'm connected to the server, and when you go to check the document in, you'll get an option, right? Do you want to copy the checked out file and overwrite the original, add it as a new version, or discard the checked out version? So those are the 3 options that you get when you have modified the document. If you have high hopes of doing some work while you were on your holiday, however you did not, and you go to check it in, the only option you'll have is discard the local copy. So basically what it's doing is it's removing that exclusive lock on that document. So while that document is checked out, no one else can edit that document, not even you, until you check it back in.
All right. Thanks, Charlotte.
Welcome.
May I add something to that?
Yes.
Of course.
And checked out documents is actually a favorites category, so you can easily see which documents you have checked out.
I did not know that. Thank you.
Well,
Very good,
although
team.
I think because you put this little checkout icon up here,
Yes.
did you mean to point out perhaps the little icon that shows up in the system tray?
That is exactly what I meant to do, and I forgot all about it. So in your systems tray, which is down in the lower left-hand corner of your computer, when you click that little up arrow, you'll see that little piece of paper with a green check, and that's the other way that you can get to them. If Worldox isn't running, right, then you can still get to those documents by ticking that little checkout, and the documents will pop up that are checked out.
Cool. So one of the things that I think most people think of, or anybody that's been into the administrative piece of Worldox, they probably think of security groups when they think of Worldox Security. And Sandy is here to tell us a little bit more about that.
Thanks. Okay, so when you're thinking about security, and as many of you may know, in Worldox Admin, you can create groups, because in a law firm, that's how you think about, you know, different people, right? You've got your partners, your associates, your staff, IT, human resources, etc. And those groups can maybe see certain cabinets that others cannot. So the first thing you want to do is simply create a group, and that group can be used for multiple things, okay? So that's what we did here. We first created a group and simply called it Partners. Next slide, please. Thanks. So what you can use your groups for, of course, cabinets. That's one of the first things I'm sure everybody thinks about. There's a partners cabinet. There's maybe a human resources cabinet. In this example on the screen, I said, okay, well, let's take a partners cabinet that a lot of our firms like to have, so that the documents in that particular cabinet are viewable and editable, or maybe just viewable by the partners group, okay? And at the bottom, you can see partners cabinets allowed to that partners group, versus the top screen, everyone is blocked from all of the groups that you see there. Okay, our next screen, please. You can also use a group to apply certain permissions. So there are features and functions and things that you don't want every single person or user in Worldox to be able to do. For instance, adding public categories. We've had a few firms where everyone can add public categories, and you end up with memo, memorandum, memoranda, you know, all these different types where it's really just one. So here, you take and put a few people in a group, which I call contributors to public categories. And I only have 3 people in there, but also the master user. And then the feature of add edit public categories is blocked from everyone and then allowed back to just those people in the group. So they're the only ones that could go in and add another memorandum for you. Okay, and our next slide, please. Okay, and when you create a group, okay, you may have noticed if you've been in admin and have created groups that there's a security, and then you've got 2 checkboxes. Now, if you're just creating a group, you just create the group and you hit OK and you're done, right? Well, if you check that top box, this group can be used to secure files and objects. Then when one of the members of that group, in this case a partner, goes to secure a document, they right-click And when they choose custom, they can add the partners group. Now, other people won't see that group under custom security. Only the people within this group can see it. So it's a nice way to narrow it down so that, okay, just partners see it, partners can use it, and then only the partners in that group see those files. Okay, so that was groups. And then there's another feature in Worldox Admin. Now, you have to do this in admin. Those of you that have been using Worldox forever probably remember that we could, as a user, create what was called a security classification. That was a long time ago. It's now limited to, you have to have someone create it for you in admin, but it doesn't take that long to create either. And what's nice about a security class is when you create it, you give it a name, and you can see who can choose it. All right, so I selected assigned users and or members of assigned groups. So what that means is I can go ahead and add users, or I can add a group. So it makes it easy to create this class. Okay, our next slide, please. All right, so here, the next dialog that you get when you're creating the security class is, okay, who's going to be in it? So just to make this really complicated, but also to show you what it can do, you can see that the users highlighted in kind of a pinkish red. Those are all users, and notice they have different rights. So Barbie doll, yeah, I took a while for me to come up with some of these names, let me tell you. But she can find it and read it, and that's it. So she can't edit it. Whereas Alligator can do anything, okay? And then at the bottom, I added the partners group. Now, when you're doing a security class and you're using groups, that group can only have, of course, one security. So you have to think about, okay, I'm adding the partners, and none of the partners should have different security rights. Okay, so when you add a group, that group gets, in this case, find and read, and that's it. Okay, I think that was it. Oh, I have one more. Okay. So when you go to use it then, so you can right click or click on the little lock up on the toolbar. Those people that are in that trust and estates security group, or trust and estate security classification, will see it. Other people won't, and then you use that to apply the security. So that way it's more of a one click. It's right there. You don't have to pick all those different users. It's all set up for you. So, you don't
even need to remember who's in the trust and estates group, in fact.
No, you don't. And that's what's nice is, especially, I use trust and estates because I do remember a firm where they were doing like estate work or wills or things like that for people in the firm. So the only users who should see those documents were the people in that department. But we didn't have a separate cabinet for them. They didn't want a separate cabinet. So we set up this security class, and we can even default it so when you go to save, that class is already selected at a quick profile, and then they were set.
Sandy, you didn't warn me you were going to have Avengers spoilers in your presentation. I'm really upset.
I don't think there were any spoilers in there.
It's right on the
just because
screen.
he has a will doesn't mean anything.
That's right. He's still alive. Don't worry.
Yeah.
There are a couple of things you said,
smart.
Sandy. Sorry, Rebecca. I just wanted to through two little tips I thought of that were triggered by something Sandy said. Um, One is that we often get asked, is it better to just add users or to add groups? And it's clearly easier, it's more manageable to work with groups because you just put people in and out of the groups. But a little unknown secret thing about performance is if you use a lot of security in the software, your performance will be much better if most of the security has been applied through groups as compared individually to files. The second thing I wanted to comment that's really important to ethical walls that have been talked about both by Sandy and I, and that is Worldox. There is a rule that we all need to learn as, inner circle VARs, and that is in Worldox, an allow wins. In Windows AD security, a deny wins. So back to when I said, if you all want to set up security in any high level at all, reach out to your reseller, your VAR, get some guidance on that, because that's a very important fundamental. And that's obviously different the way server AD rights work and how Worldox works.
And Frank, say that one more time so people, if you haven't written that down, that is one of the good tips to write down, because Frank and I actually, not an argument, but we were discussing that just a few days ago, and I had it backwards. I did. So write it down. Frank?
Well, for those who ever look at geeky things, like they go to a security tab tied to a document or a folder, and they look to see, and there's groups there, domain users, authenticated users, everyone, okay? Here's a good example. Working with a university the other day, and their IT person had set up the permissions to the network structure, and the everyone group was in that base permission. And the everyone group was set as basically read only. Well, people were inherently a member of everyone, which, by the way, it's not a good idea to use that group, but that's a whole nother conversation. But they're inherently a member of that, and the users couldn't access and work with the files to save or retrieve. The problem was that that group, everyone with a lower right, prevailed over the fact that domain users had a higher right, proving that in Active Directory, the deny wins. So the least permissions you have win. In Worldox, the allow wins. And this really super matters when you get into lots of ethical walls and security groups, because people may be part of different things. And if you really want to get to a super deep level in this, in Worldox admin, when you look at the security on the left and everyone's at the top, the structure of that security also has a relevance here. So if you make a security subgroup lower down in that structure, it has a different capability than if you do it higher in the structure. So the depth actually has a value. The higher level wins. So I'm making my case for security is a great thing. I think we all need to deploy it. Every customer should have Active Directory integration turned on. And once you reach that level, we really need to get you involved with your reseller, whoever that is, and up this a bit so that you're taking full advantage of everything.
Yes, Frank, you make a great point. It's definitely important to have a reseller involved before you set this stuff up, because what we've also seen in technical support is that people try to set a lot of this up on their own, and then there are all sorts of problems because it wasn't well thought out from the beginning, and there are conflicts that are making things move a lot slower than it should, and it turns into a big mess to fix if you sort of don't conceive of what your plan is going to be from the beginning, and that's where a reseller can definitely help you. And we've also seen firms where somebody has the responsibility for setting these things up who doesn't really have a lot of technological background and doesn't necessarily understand that the nuances between Worldox security versus Active Directory security, and exactly what Frank was pointing out. And if you don't have an understanding about how those work together, it's very easy to either give too many permissions to people or not enough, and end up with a support problem.
That's right. And you'll know you have one, Rebecca. You'll know you have one. Those folks that manage Worldox admin, if you go into ethical walls and you apply an ethical wall or a group security and you go to sync that manually, and that's taking an exceedingly long amount of time, it's either because you have a huge Active Directory and a whole lot going on in Worldox, or it's actually not set up properly. So instead of waiting for hours for it to complete, that's a hint, hint. You probably need somebody to take a look at that.
Thanks, Frank. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about securing individual files. And we have John Rock to guide us through that, through many slides.
I feel so small comparatively. And for you, those of you in the audience that are kind of overwhelmed by the massive details we've been talking about, I'm going to dumb it down a little bit, because we're going to talk about something that end users can do irregardless of most everything we've talked about. And this is a user level issue that you can do to kind of secure your documents in a sense. So if y'all want to just take a break, the end users on the line, take a break and enjoy the next little video slide show. So with Worldox, you can put file level security on any file from 2 locations. And in the first slide here, you'll say when saving a new file, you hit the profile card down on the left, you can click on Add Security, next. Or in the file list window up on the button bar, you'll see the security lock there as well. So those are the 2 places where you can put file level security on a file. Now let's talk about how you do that. Next. So at the file save, if you click Add Security, you'll be presented with 3 options. There's custom, which we've talked about. Sandy just talked about that. There's hidden, invisible to everyone else, and there's protected, read only to everyone else. So you have 3 choices. Let's go through those 3 choices and show you what they are. If you choose custom, define rights by users or groups, you can add a group to allow a group of users access to the file. Sandy talked about this previously. Go ahead. And when you choose add a group, you'll be presented with the groups that you have permission to see. Here there's 2, the partners group and the real estate team. Next. Once you select your groups, you're going to see over to the right the rights that you can allow or deny the groups to this file, or if in the sense you've chosen multiple files, you can find, read, write, profile, delete, or secure. And you can give permissions and restrict what folks have to do with that file. Next. Adding users or users to the file is similar to adding a group, only you select users from the list. So when you see the list on the right, actually hold on, if you go to add a user, you'll be presented with the user list, and you can check users that you want to have permission to this file. Next. This option with hidden, invisible to everyone else, this will hide the file from most users. And I kind of tell folks, you know, this is most users, because there's always Worldox admins out there, and the Worldox admin has to have permission to everything by default, because they need to be able to correct our mistakes when we make them. And so my disclaimer here is that it hides it from most users, because Worldox managers can see all files regardless of security you place on it, so be aware. And my illustration has always been, don't be thinking that you're marking a file hidden when you're updating your resume and you're listing jobs that you're applying for. And that's happened before, and it's quite humorous, but also quite embarrassing. When you mark a file as hidden, you'll see at the end of that arrow, you'll see that they're listed as either hidden, invisible to everyone else. Go ahead, Rebecca. Or if you chose protected, read only to everyone else, you'll see the differences down in the bottom of that profile card. And the third option here is protected read-only to everyone else. And choose this option. Go back one, please. Choose this option to protect the contents of the document from edits by other Worldox users. As we've already talked about previously, they can open the file, but they have to save it as a new file or as a version of your original file. Next. You can edit or remove security from a file using the Change Security button over on the right. Then you get to choose an option from the list. You can classify, reclassify, declassify, properties, or no change. File security can be added, edited, or removed from the Worldox file list window using the security button on the button bar, and you'll be presented with the same options that we've already discussed. Over on the left of the file, when you are in a firm that users have locked documents, either custom read-only or protected, you'll see a padlock on there, and the padlock will change based on the type of security applied. And that gives you a little tip that the file is secured. You may not be able to open it. You may not be able to touch it. You know, it's restricted in some way or other. Now, if for some reason you don't, this is an example of not seeing that green icon or that green padlock. Oftentimes, when you hit that best fit button, it will not expand the column far enough. So if you go over to that column header where the arrow's pointing, and you just drag that over to the right a little bit, and I think the next slide will show.
I think that was your last slide, but I think this slide shows what you're talking about.
So yeah, that column can be expanded to show the padlock. And that concludes the file level security and how easy you can use that to secure documents.
And if I could make one little comment, and if I make one comment, when you mark a document read-only, so just remember, and I know Van's going to get into this a little bit, but you're marking it read-only to everyone else. And what I tell people is no one else can screw it up, but you can still screw it up, okay? So just remember, you can't secure it against yourself.
All right. So to get a little deeper into a couple of these features, I think John Heckman is going to explain some specific examples of things.
Okay. All right, we start with ethical walls. Ethical walls, which used to be called Chinese walls, which is actually a major engineering marvel, but it's been dropped. Ethical walls prevent everybody except certain people from seeing a cabinet, a group of files, or whatever. So it goes back to what Frank was talking about a negative approach. People only see what they need or only see certain things. And typically this comes up in HR admin groups where you have certain assistants that see certain types of documents. So those can be set up. And what the admin or what the firm needs to do is to set up and draw up a list of who should get to see what. I always do everything I can to prevent clients from trying to do ethical walls because inevitably they'll just screw it up. But they need to draw up the list of who gets to see what. Okay, next.
This is actually the only slide that you have.
I had two other things. One is features. Various people have talked about this. Again, the firm needs to sit down, the office manager, and discuss how they want to configure Worldox. The first question, of course, is who gets to even see admin? just because someone's a partner does not mean that they should have rights to admin. In fact, that might be a negative criteria. So you want certain people to do that. You only want certain people to be able to make up clients and matters or doc types. Sandy's example with categories, I had a firm that insisted that everybody had to create doc types. And less than a week later, they came back and they say, gee, we have these multiple things, but they're all the same thing. And how do you fix it? And depending what they do, fixing it can be somewhat complicated. Another feature that people need to consider is the deletion feature. When you go to delete a document, you have three options. Send to the salvage bin, which is like a network recycle bin, delete, or shred. You absolutely want to get rid of delete or shred so that, and again, only certain people can access the salvage bin. And that protects you, first of all, from the, oh, damn, I didn't mean to do that. When people delete files, I get somebody that calls me up, or people call me up maybe every 3 or 6 months. We've deleted these files. How do we get them back? And secondly, it protects you against maliciousness, because if people do try to delete files, they're leaving or whatever, they can always be recovered. So you've got deletion, you've got the ability to create doc types, you've got the ability to create categories, and the firm needs to sit down and have a discussion of who should be able to do what. And then from there, you can go and go on it further. And the last thing was personal files. One of the main things that always comes up when a firm is implementing Worldox is, what about my personal files? And aside from the fact that technically any file created, any document created on a firm computer belongs to the firm, most firms don't enforce that, although I've had a couple that did. And generally what I do is I create either a cabinet or just a client matter where people can store their personal documents. And this can be either available to everybody, it's just a repository, or set up with a personal ethical wall so that each user only sees their own documents. And it's like their C drive, but inside Worldox. And the advantage is that it's indexed, it can be indexed, it can be searchable, and if need be, the firm has easy access to it. And also when that person gets a new computer or their computer crashes or whatever, everything that's on their C drive doesn't disappear. So those are some of the things. And one thing to add to Sandy's the example of personal security, I actually had a client one time where the managing partner did up a memo saying, maybe we ought to get rid of the office manager position. I'm not sure we really need it. And he secured it. And guess what? The office manager was a manager. And he looked at this memo and he said, gee, I guess it's time to send out my resume. So that's another example of that sort of thing.
Well, thanks, John. Up next, we actually have a feature that I didn't realize existed that Van's going to tell us about. Well, it used to exist as part of the product, but you've basically come up with a way to add it back.
Yes, that's right. We used this back in Worldox GX and GX2, where if you have security on a Worldox document where it's set as protected, maybe I'm the person who's responsible for keeping forms documents up to date or example documents up to date, precedents or something. So the documents in that library will have been set as read-only for the folks who will be using them, but certain folks will also have the ability to edit them. So it may be when I'm opening up a form and I'm going to use it as a new form, so if I am one of the owners of that form, I could accidentally save over it. and replace it because I didn't do a proper save as. So if you want to protect your forms from yourself, there is a way to set a Windows read-only attribute. Okay, and there's a download that you have there, or contact your reseller, because we've set up a few of these recently. This is using the Worldox Send To feature, where you can add a menu that will trigger a Windows read-only attribute on the file, which is a security setting in Windows. Then if I were to just open it in Worldox, it would force me, even though I have the ability to edit it from Worldox, it would give me a second layer of protection so that I don't accidentally open and write over my form once I've edited it. So you'll see here on this panel, it says read only, add, or remove. So I would, if I really intended to change the form and I want to republish it with my edits, I would go right click on the document, read only, remove the Windows read only attribute, open the document, make my edit, save and replace it, and then right click, read only, add to reapply that Windows read only attribute. Okay, so this is very helpful if you manage forms or you're responsible for editing documents that are read only to everyone else.
And I have something to add to that. So in previous versions of Worldox, you could add the Windows security and not even realize that it was Windows security because there was a little diskette in the save window where you could actually click that, and that was Windows security and not Worldox security. So then along comes the newer version of Worldox and you upgrade and that little diskette is gone. And that's where we will get calls then from Baker Kagan's clients that will say, oh, well, I used to have this little diskette in the other version. And then we'll remote in and add this ability to add, remove the Windows security. So sometimes it happens by accident.
Right. That's helpful.
Yeah, I imagine if people set something to read only back when they had an earlier version of Worldox and then didn't need to access that file for a long time, they might be completely baffled as to why they can't actually save over it.
Yeah, and then in the newer version, then they may have forgotten that they used that little diskette, and so what happens is they think it's the Windows security that John just talked about, and they go there and they're going, what? There's no security. And so, oh, there, right. Help us.
Right, and actually if you expand the version column will show you a little diskette icon with the red circle. That means it's read-only. So you can't tell from a work list. You may just need to do, as I think John Rock suggested, and expand the column. And in this case, for the Windows attribute, it would be the version column.
Well, thanks, Van.
You're welcome.
And we have a few more features that Peter was going to talk to us about. Peter?
Sure. So, you know, if you go to a museum and you see a barrier, sometimes it's to protect the thing behind the barrier, the painting or the artifact. So it's protecting what's in there. But if you get to the Grand Canyon and you get a barrier, it's so that people aren't stupid enough to fall off the cliff and go down into the canyon. So barriers can either protect what's beyond it or what's on this side of it. And UNC, or Universal Naming Convention, is an example of that. You know, WData Clients here is very friendly to users. They have a C drive. They know what other drive letters are. If they go to My PC, if you look here, you see Finance, Legacy, Downloads, and Worldox. So all this W is very friendly to people. But that's a problem, because often people put in Worldox because people are dragging folders on top of folders and losing stuff. And if you put in Worldox and just use drive letters, then, believe it or not, they can still quite easily go and screw themselves up and get to things and make changes. So the drive letters is an easy access. UNC, where it's a universal name, we use a server name. So in this case, we got server 2012 R2. Immediately, you're probably getting glassy-eyed already saying, I don't know what that is or what he's talking about. That's actually good news, because that means that UNC works, because 90% of users have no idea what UNC is. They don't know how to work it. And right away, it's a barrier to those people immediately. So that's just by putting in a server name instead of a drive letter. It also protects because currently the encryption programs and the malware that people are getting to encrypt, those are actually working on drive letters, but not on UNC paths. They may get there in the future, but currently they're not. So we're protecting the files from some crypto locker or something like that. And the next level is when you put a $ at the end of a share, like this hidden share $, that becomes invisible in the operating system, because the one on the left, the more challenging one, would actually show if they navigate down to the server name, it would show them a list of shares. But if you put a $ on the end of your share, then it's totally invisible to users. They have to literally know the exact spelling of the name of the share to get there. But this, of course, Worldox knows all of this, so this has no impact on Worldox whatsoever. So it functions 100%, but you're locking off the users from either doing damage to themselves, and also the curious user that wants to see everybody's salary and realize that even though Worldox Security was turned on, they can go in the back door and they can find stuff. And the only last thing I'll say is, obviously with Active Directory, that's the one that totally locks the door completely tight, because even if they go in the back way, they won't get to the things they're not supposed to get to if the full Active Directory is on. But sometimes people don't turn that on fully. And one thing I found recently actually was somebody that had Active Directory fully integrated and all the security was done correctly. But there was a change in Worldox not long ago where if you don't turn on the Active Directory again, the groups that were created after that do not get reflected in Active Directory. And again, so this is another example of where people have been saying all along, work with the reseller, your VAR, because we can detect things like this that you may think that you've done everything because it was done 2 years ago, but guess what? Things have changed somewhat, and you may no longer be as protected as you think you are. So it's always good to do a security review, look at some of these things, and just use some of these tactics to really tie things down for the benefit of the users and the integrity of your documents and the secrecy of your documents.
Actually, to your point, Peter, there's a lot of firms that have had Worldox for a very long time. And not only has technology changed, but best practices have changed. So working with a VAR just to review your entire system is always a good idea periodically, just because so many things change in technology over the course of time. So I know we've gone over our time, but we have one last thing, and I'm going to do my best to try and explain this quickly, although it has been a little mystifying to a lot of our clients. We do have two-factor authentication included in Worldox, and it's fairly straightforward when it comes to turning it on for Worldox Web. However, if you turn it, so by default, two-factor authentication is turned on for the Worldox client, and it's turned on for Worldox Web by default. This password required is turned off by default. Now, when you first log into Worldox Web, if you add a password, or if you set up two-factor authentication, which you're going to be prompted to do because you're logging into it for the first time, and by default it's turned on. So once you set that two-factor authentication, every time you log into Worldox Web, it's going to prompt you. However, because two-factor authentication is also on by default for the Worldox client, it's also going to prompt you for two-factor authentication when you log into the Worldox client. So if you don't want that to happen, then you need to enable two-factor authentication for Worldox Web and turn it off for the Worldox client. Now, there are some people that do want it to be on for the Worldox client, and maybe they don't even have Worldox Web. So by default, I mentioned the Worldox client has it turned on. However, until you set it up for the first time, it's not going to force it for anyone. The only way it's going to force it for everyone is if you turn this password required on. So in order to have two-factor authentication for your Worldox client, and for getting Worldox Web, you're going to have to enable the Worldox client two-factor authentication, and you're going to have to enable the password required for everyone as well. Now, I have had some people ask, well, what if I only want to set it up for a couple of people? I would question, to me, if you've only got two-factor authentication set up for a couple of people, then all the rest of those people are your hole in the system. That's how somebody's going to break into your system. And for anybody that's listened to me talk about security in the past, multi-factor authentication is the #1 thing that that can thwart hackers from getting into your system. So anything that you have, whether you're accessing your bank, whether you're accessing Facebook or whatever, anything that has an option for two-factor authentication, I usually recommend that people use it. When you're talking about Worldox, if you're only allowed to access Worldox once you're logged on to the network, then you may not feel that it's necessary to have two-factor authentication turned on for your Worldox client. But for people who have, say, Worldox Enterprise or Worldox Cloud, they might want to turn that on, especially if they have a third-party IT company, because what they can do is, if they don't launch the enterprise client or the cloud client, they can have one of their IT people do maintenance or do whatever they need to do to their local PC. And if they just haven't launched the client, that person's not going to be able to get access to it, because they would have to actually launch the client, enter in the password, and have the two-factor authentication in order to be able to access that. So that's one of the main reasons why we added that in for the Worldox client. It has, of course, been in great demand for Worldox Web, and a lot of our clients are actually using it for Worldox Web. So I think hopefully I haven't confused matters too much on that topic. And we've gone over about 15 minutes because I think there was just too much to say on this topic. But I will leave you with the contact information for all of our VARs who have joined us today. And I don't know whether we have time for questions. But
actually, I think we've pretty much covered everything, because it doesn't look like we have any questions today. So everybody really went into the details for everybody. Unless anybody has anything else they would like to add that we missed, I think we covered. So thank you to all of you for sharing the suggestions and information on how Worldox can be part of the security plans for the firm. And as mentioned, we did record it. The recording will be posted on our library for the webinars. And then we hope that you will join us all again for another webinar, usually scheduled on Friday, 2 o'clock. And thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Great, thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Great material.
Thank you.